Over the past couple of weeks, Ecuador has been erupting in massive protests over fuel prices. But this crisis didn't start yesterday. It began 50 years ago. Here's how we got here. In 1974, under General Guillermo Rodriguez Lara's military dictatorship, Ecuador struck oil and decided to share the wealth by fixing fuel prices far below cost. Essentially, the government started subsidizing fuel for everyone. At the time, it sounded fair. Cheap gas meant cheaper food and lower living costs. The popularity of the subsidy also helped the military cling to power until 1979. But that decision became one of the worst economic traps in Ecuador's history. Over the next 5 decades, the country poured more than $60 billion into keeping fuel cheap, roughly $100 billion today when adjusted for inflation. That money that could have built schools, hospitals, and infrastructure was literally burned away at the pump, driving pollution and waste. And only about 10% of that money ever reached the poor. Government data shows that the richest 20% of Ecuadorians consume nearly half of the nation's fuel. That means for every dollar spent on subsidies, 90 cents went to people who didn't need it. Wealthier drivers, transport companies, and heavy fuel users. Meanwhile, cheap fuel fueled corruption, pollution, and smuggling. Criminal networks moved billions in subsidized fuel across the borders to Peru and Colombia, reselling it at higher prices. Every president who's tried to end this has faced turmoil. From Maguad's fall in 2000 to Lenin Moreno's riots in 2019, Guillermo Lazo's standoff in 2022, and now Daniel Noboa's crisis in 2025. What's striking is that much of today's resistance comes from CONAIE, the Ecuadorian Indigenous Federation, even though indigenous Ecuadorians are among those who benefit the least from subsidies and care the most about protecting the environment. These protests often block key roads, causing multi-million-dollar losses as businesses can't move their goods and tourists can't enter to spend money, especially in the country's most heavily indigenous regions. Many now suspect that parts of this unrest may actually be fueled by smugglers and criminal networks that profit from the chaos. If the government holds firm, 2025 could finally mark the end of Ecuador's oil subsidy era and the beginning of an economy no longer held hostage to cheap fuel. After 50 years of cheap fuel and costly consequences, what path do you think Ecuador should take next?